What if the wisdom of 1,000 years depended not on libraries, but on a whisper across a smoky fire? What if survival itself was a lesson passed hand to hand, not page to page between the 5th and 15th centuries? Number 10. The sacred rhythm of the monastery. In the vast, shifting world of medieval Europe, from the 5th to the 15th century, monasteries stood as quiet, towering fortresses of knowledge. They were not just places of prayer. They were living, breathing universities, scriptoria, and agricultural centers, all rolled into one. Here, the elders, often the abbots, or the most learned monks, held the keys to a universe of information, and they passed it on with a discipline and devotion almost impossible to grasp. Today, the process was slow, deliberate, and deeply integrated into the monastic life itself. A young novice, perhaps just a boy of 7 or 8, would arrive at the monastery gates, often given over by his family, for a life of service or study. He would begin his education, not with books but with observation. He would watch the elder monks move through their daily routines, a silent ballet of prayer work and study. The first lessons were about obedience and the meticulous structure of monastic life. The formal transmission of knowledge began with the basics, learning Latin. This was the universal language of scholarship, theology, and administration across medieval Europe. An elder monk, often called the magister, would guide the young novice through the Psalms, the Gospels, and other sacred texts. This was not a quick lesson. It was a repetitive, almost meditative immersion. The novice would chant, copy, and recite slowly, internalizing the language. The elder would correct pronunciation, explain grammatical structures, and subtly introduce the theological meanings embedded in the words. It was a rigorous, patient process, often taking years before a novice could truly comprehend the complex Latin texts. Historians like Jean Leclerc have described this monastic education as a deep, holistic formation of the individual, not just an intellectual exercise. Beyond language, the scriptorium was where the true heart of written knowledge beat. Here, under the watchful eyes of master scribes, younger monks learned the art of copying manuscripts. This was a painstaking skill requiring immense patience, precision, and an almost artistic flair. An elder scribe would demonstrate how to prepare parchment, how to mix inks, how to hold the quill, and how to form each letter with perfect consistency. He would supervise every stroke, every line correcting errors, not with harsh words, but with gentle guidance and repeated demonstration. The younger monks would copy not just religious texts, but also classical works by authors like Virgil and Cicero, medical treatises, and historical chronicles. Through this laborious copying, they absorbed the content of these books. It was a form of active learning where the physical act of transcription burned the knowledge into their minds. They became living libraries, remembering passages simply from the sheer repetition of writing them out. The elder scribes also taught illumination, the art of decorating manuscripts with intricate designs and vibrant colors. This required knowledge of pigments, drawing, and symbolic imagery. The artistic traditions were passed down from master to apprentice, often incorporating regional styles and personal touches that made each monastery's work unique. The Book of Kells, for example, is a famous testament to the artistic and scholarly skill nurtured in monastic scriptoria. The knowledge transferred in monasteries extended far beyond academic subjects. Monasteries were self-sufficient communities, and as such they were centers of practical skills. Elder monks, who might have spent decades tending the monastery's gardens, fields, or infirmary, would teach younger monks vital practical knowledge. For instance, the abbot or the monastic cellarer would teach methods of brewing ale or making wine, critical for both sustenance and income. The elder would demonstrate the entire process from harvesting grains or grapes to the fermentation and storage. He would explain the subtle signs of a good batch, the correct temperatures, and the proper sanitation, all learned through years of trial and error. This was knowledge transmitted through direct demonstration and supervision, often without written instructions, relying on observation and repeated practice. In the monastic infirmary, Elder monks, with experience in healing, would pass on medical knowledge. This was a blend of ancient Greek and Roman medical theories, often preserved in texts like those by Galen and local folk remedies. The elder infirmarian would teach about the medicinal properties of various herbs grown in the monastery garden, how to prepare poultices and tinctures, and how to treat common ailments, wounds, and fevers. This involved identifying plants, understanding their active compounds, even if the chemical basis was unknown, and applying them correctly. Young monks would assist in tending to the sick, learning by doing, observing the elders' diagnostic methods, and understanding the importance of hygiene and patient care, which was often more advanced in monasteries than in the wider world at the time. The physical care of the sick was seen as an act of piety, and the knowledge associated with it was considered a sacred trust. Agriculture was another major area of knowledge transfer. Many monasteries were vast landowners, and their economic survival depended on successful farming. Elder monks, often lay brothers with deep roots in the land, would teach the younger generation the rhythms of the seasons, the best times for planting and harvesting different crops, crop rotation techniques, and how to manage livestock. They would demonstrate how to plow, sow seeds, prune vines, and maintain irrigation systems. This was deeply experiential learning, conducted outdoors in the fields, under the sun and in the rain. The elders taught about soil quality, weather patterns, and the subtle signs of a healthy crop or a sick animal. This practical wisdom was crucial, not just for the monastery's survival, but often for the surrounding communities who relied on monastic farms for employment or surplus food. The Cistercian order, for example, became famous for its agricultural innovations, spreading farming techniques across Europe through its network of abbeys. The transmission of theological and spiritual knowledge was perhaps the most central aspect of monastic education. Elder monks, often those who had spent decades in contemplation and study, would guide younger monks in Lectio Divina, a meditative reading of Scripture. This was not merely intellectual study, but a deep reflective engagement with the text, seeking spiritual understanding and personal transformation. The elder would share insights gleaned from years of prayer and spiritual struggle, explaining difficult passages, discussing the lives of saints, and teaching the principles of monastic spirituality. They would offer spiritual direction, listening to the younger monks' struggles and guiding them toward a deeper connection with their faith. This was highly personal instruction, often one-on-one, resembling a mentorship more than a classroom lecture. The goal was to shape, not just a scholar, but a holy person. The wisdom of the elders also encompassed the history and traditions of their specific monastic order in the wider church. Young monks would learn about the lives of the order's founders, its rules, and its pivotal moments. They would memorize liturgical chants and understand the symbolism behind the complex rituals of worship. The elder choirmaster would teach the nuances of Gregorian chant, ensuring proper intonation, rhythm, and emotional expression. This was not just about memorizing notes. It was about understanding the spiritual power of music and its role in communal prayer. Each chant, each ritual, carried centuries of meaning, and the elders were the living repositories of that meaning, passing it down through practice and example. The slow, repetitive nature of monastic life itself reinforced these lessons, allowing the knowledge to sink in, deeply becoming part of the monk's very being. Number 9. The power of apprenticeship and the guild system. Step into any bustling medieval town from the 12th to the 15th century, and you would witness a foundational pillar of knowledge transfer. The apprenticeship. This was no classroom. It was a workshop, a forge, a tailor's bench, or a baker's oven. Young people, often starting as early as 7 or 8 years old, would leave their families to live and work with a master craftsman. This was an immersive education, lasting typically 7 years, though it could be longer for more complex trades. The elder, the master, was not just an employer. They were a surrogate parent, a teacher, and a living encyclopedia of their craft. The knowledge was passed on through constant direct observation and immediate practical application. A master carpenter, for instance, would not lecture a young apprentice on the principles of joinery. Instead, he would measure a beam, cut it with precise blows of an axe, then smooth it with an adze. The apprentice would watch, studying every movement, every shift of weight, every choice of tool. Then he would be given a piece of wood and told to try. His first attempts would be clumsy, frustrating. The master would not just tell him what was wrong. He would demonstrate the correct way again, perhaps guiding the apprentice's hands, showing the right pressure, the ideal angle. This hands-on, repetitive learning was crucial. There were no textbooks for most crafts. The knowledge resided in the master's body, in his calloused hands, in his experienced eyes. The skills were literally embodied. Over the years, the apprentice would move from menial tasks like sweeping a workshop or fetching tools to more complex assignments. He would learn to prepare materials, grinding pigments for a painter, tempering metal for a smith, curing leather for a shoemaker. The master would introduce him to the properties of different woods, metals, fabrics, or clays. This knowledge was often sensory, understanding the feel of a sharp chisel, the smell of certain dyes, the sound of a perfectly struck piece of iron. Elder masters would explain the nuances of their materials, which type of oak was best for shipbuilding, how to tell if wool was of good quality, the subtle differences in various clays for pottery. This was practical science honed over generation. The master also taught the apprentice about the business side of the craft. They would learn how to source raw materials, how to estimate costs, how to bargain with customers, and how to manage their time. The elder would teach about quality control, the importance of reputation, and the ethical conduct expected within the trade. For a tailor, this might mean learning how to measure a client, understand their needs, and deliver a garment that not only fit perfectly, but also lasted. For a baker, it was about consistency in bread making, understanding yeast and ensuring a steady supply of fresh loaves for the community. These were not just technical skills, but the holistic understanding of running a successful enterprise. The guild system, which emerged strongly from the 11th century onwards, formalized this process of knowledge transfer and protected its integrity. Guilds were associations of craftsmen in a particular trade: goldsmiths, weavers, masons, bakers, tanners, and many more. They set standards for quality, regulated prices, and provided social welfare for their members. The elder masters within the guild were the arbiters of knowledge. They oversaw the apprenticeship system, ensuring that apprentices received proper training, and that the secrets of the trade were not diluted or misused. A young apprentice, upon completing his training, would become a journeyman. This meant he could travel and work for different masters, gaining broader experience and refining his skills. This travel was a form of horizontal knowledge transfer, allowing different regional techniques to mingle and evolve. To become a master himself, a journeyman had to present a masterpiece, a work of exceptional quality that demonstrated his complete command of the craft. This piece was judged by the elder masters of the guild. If it met their rigorous standards, and if the journeyman could afford the fees and prove his good character, he would be admitted into the guild as a master. This system ensured that only those with proven skill and comprehensive knowledge were allowed to train new apprentices, thus maintaining a high standard of craftsmanship across generations. For example, a master mason would teach the apprentice about architectural principles, the strength of different stone cuts, how to build arches and vaults, and the proper use of mortar. The elder mason would guide the young apprentice through the process of carving intricate gargoyles or laying the foundations of a grand cathedral, explaining the structural integrity needed for such massive projects. This was not just about building, it was about understanding physics, geometry, and structural engineering, all passed down through practical experience and observation. The transfer of knowledge also included the tools of the trade. An elder master would not just hand an apprentice a chisel. He would teach him how to sharpen it, how to care for it, and how to know when a tool was no longer fit for purpose. Many tools were custom-made, and their specific designs often held generations of refinements passed down alongside the skills themselves. For a shoemaker, this meant understanding the different lasts, the various types of leather knives, and the specialized hammers needed for different parts of a shoe. The proper maintenance of these tools was as important as knowing how to use them, as a dull or poorly maintained tool could ruin a piece of work or even cause injury. Beyond the technical skills, apprenticeships also passed on a strong work ethic, discipline, and the social norms of the craft. The apprentice learned punctuality, diligence, and respect for authority. He absorbed the unwritten rules of the workshop, the camaraderie among fellow craftsmen, and the specific jargon of his trade. The elder master's home was often the apprentice's home, blurring the lines between work and life. The apprentice observed the master's entire way of life, learning about managing a household, raising a family, and participating in community life. This holistic learning environment meant that the knowledge transferred was not just about craft techniques, but about becoming a contributing, responsible member of society. The guild systems sometimes also transferred secrets of the trade. Certain recipes, special techniques, or sources of rare materials might be closely guarded within a master's family or a specific guild to maintain a competitive advantage. For instance, the secret of making Venetian glass or Damascus steel was often passed down through incredibly tight circles, sometimes even requiring a formal oath of secrecy. These were high-value pieces of knowledge, and their transmission was carefully controlled by the elders who possessed them. The very concept of trade secrets originated from this period, highlighting the immense value placed on specialized, hard-won knowledge. The elder in this context was not just a teacher, but a guardian of invaluable, sometimes clandestine, wisdom. Number 8. The echoes of oral tradition and storytelling. Before widespread literacy, and even alongside it, the medieval world from the 5th to the 15th century pulsed with the vibrant energy of oral traditions. Elders were the living libraries, the walking archives of history, law, lore, and entertainment. Knowledge was not written on parchment, but etched into memory, polished by retelling and passed on through the spoken word. This method was pervasive, touching every aspect of life from the grand halls of kings to the humble cottages of peasants. Bards, sculpists, and griots, though known by different names across Europe, were professional storytellers and poets, often attached to noble courts. These elders held vast repositories of epic poems, sagas, and genealogical histories. They would perform for hours, sometimes days, reciting tales of legendary heroes, ancient battles, and the lineage of ruling families. The Anglo-Saxon epic Beowulf, for example, is a testament to the power of oral tradition, originally transmitted through generations of performers, before being written down. A younger bard would apprentice under an elder master, learning the art of memorization, improvisation, and performance. The elder would teach not just the stories themselves, but the intricate poetic structures, the use of alliteration and kennings, and the dramatic timing necessary to captivate an audience. This was a sophisticated art form, crucial for preserving cultural identity and collective memory. The elder bard was a bridge to the past, reminding the present of its roots and values. Beyond the professional storytellers, every community had its elders, who were the carriers of local wisdom. Grandparents would tell children folk tales, myths, and legends around the fire. These stories often contained embedded moral lessons, warnings about dangers, or explanations for natural phenomena. A tale about a mischievous sprite might teach a child not to wander into the woods alone. A story about a cunning fox might teach about cleverness or deception. These narratives were more than entertainment. They were pedagogical tools. The elder's voice, tone, and gestures were as much a part of the lesson as the words themselves, adding layers of meaning and emotional resonance. The repetition of these stories across generations ensured their survival and their continued impact on the community's values and beliefs. Historical memory was also preserved through oral tradition. Before extensive written chronicles, the major events of a kingdom or a community, wars, famines, plagues, alliances, and significant births or deaths, were recounted by elders. These narratives might be less poetic than Bard's epics, but they were vital for understanding local history and identity. A village elder might recount how a particular bridge was built generations ago, or how a specific family came to settle in the area. This was communal history passed down through shared remembrance and collective narration. Younger generations would listen, ask questions, and eventually become the new custodians of these oral histories, adding their own experiences to the ever-evolving narrative. This was especially important in regions where literacy was low, making the elder the primary link to the past. Legal knowledge, particularly customary law, was heavily reliant on oral tradition. In many parts of medieval Europe, especially in early periods, formal written laws were less common than established customs. When disputes arose, elders of the community, often known for their wisdom and memory, would be consulted. They would recall precedents, explain traditional practices, and arbitrate based on long-standing agreements and unwritten rules that had been passed down through generations. A community elder might recall a specific judgment from their grandfather's time that applied to a current land dispute. Learning this law meant listening to countless stories of past cases, understanding the underlying principles, and recognizing the nuances of community expectation. This was knowledge deeply embedded in the social fabric maintained by collective memory and the authority of respected elders. Practical knowledge for daily life was also primarily transmitted orally. Farmers would share advice on weather patterns, the best times for planting, or how to deal with specific pests based on generations of observation. A seasoned farmer might tell a young man, when the oak leaves are the size of a mouse's ear, that's when you plant your beans. This was not just a proverb, it was a distillation of centuries of agricultural wisdom, passed down through concise, memorable phrases. Similarly, midwives and healers would pass on knowledge of medicinal herbs, remedies, and birthing techniques through direct instruction, demonstration, and personal demonstration. The elder midwife would guide a younger woman through a difficult birth, explaining each step, sharing the traditional chants or prayers believed to aid the process, and demonstrating hands-on techniques. The knowledge was experiential, learned by doing and by absorbing the wisdom that came from countless encounters with sickness and birth. Even skills like hunting, fishing, and foraging relied heavily on oral transmission. An elder hunter would teach a young boy how to track animals by recognizing subtle signs, how to set traps, and how to use specific calls to lure game. He would impart knowledge about the habits of different animals, the best places to find them, and the dangers of the wilderness. This included identifying edible plants versus poisonous ones, knowing which berries were ripe, and understanding the seasons for different resources. This was survival knowledge, critical for sustenance, and it was often wrapped in stories or cautionary tales that made it memorable and adult. The elder was the wilderness guide, passing on the secrets of the land. Religious instruction also relied heavily on oral methods. Parish priests, often the most educated members of a local community, would preach sermons, explain biblical stories, and teach catechism orally to their congregations. Many people could not read the Latin Bible, so their understanding of Christian doctrine came directly from the spoken word. The elder priest would use vivid imagery, relatable analogies, and repetitive phrasing to ensure that complex theological concepts were understood by a largely illiterate populace. Hymns and prayers were memorized through repeated chanting. The stories of saints and miracles were told and retold, reinforcing faith and moral conduct. These oral sermons and instructions shaped the spiritual lives of millions across medieval Europe, establishing beliefs and ethical frameworks. The elder priest standing in the pulpit was a direct conduit of divine and moral knowledge for his flock. Number 7. The intimate world of family and household lore. In the medieval period, from the 5th to the 15th century, the family and the household were the primary schools of life. Knowledge transmission within this intimate sphere was constant, practical, and deeply personal. Elders, parents, grandparents, older siblings, and even respected domestic servants were the first and most influential teachers. This was not formal schooling. It was a continuous immersion in the skills, values, and traditions necessary for survival and prosperity within their specific social class. For the vast majority of the population who were peasants, knowledge transfer revolved around agricultural life and household management. A father, as the elder head of the family, would teach his sons how to plow a field, sow seeds, tend to livestock, and repair tools. This was done through direct demonstration and shared labor. A young boy would follow his father to the fields, observing every step of the farming cycle. He would learn how to read the weather signs, understand the quality of the soil, and know the precise timing for planting or harvesting different crops. The father would explain the importance of crop rotation, the use of manure as fertilizer, and the care needed for draft animals like oxen or horses. The knowledge was accumulated over a lifetime of working the land, and it was passed down through the rhythm of the seasons year after year, embedding itself deeply into the younger generation's understanding of their world. Mothers and grandmothers, as the elder women of the household, were the primary educators for daughters in all matters of domestic economy. A young girl would learn how to manage a household, how to cook, bake, spin wool, weave cloth, make candles and soap, preserve food, and care for children. This was an incredibly complex set of skills, crucial for the family's survival and comfort. The elder woman would demonstrate how to knead dough, how to operate a loom, how to dye fabrics using natural pigments, and how to store grains to prevent spoilage. She would teach which herbs were safe to eat, how to gather firewood efficiently, and how to maintain a clean home. This was often done side by side with the younger girl, mimicking the elder's movements, receiving gentle corrections, and eventually mastering these vital life skills. The kitchen and the hearth were central classrooms, and the elder woman was the master teacher. For children of noble families, the household still served as a crucial site of knowledge transfer, though the content differed. Young boys, often sent to live in the household of another noble, as a page, would learn courtly etiquette, basic literacy, sometimes, and the skills necessary for knighthood. An elder knight or a steward would teach them how to ride a horse, handle a sword, use a bow, and participate in hunting. They would learn about chivalric codes, loyalty, and proper conduct in the presence of lords and ladies. This involved observing older knights practicing with wooden swords and participating in mock battles. The elder knight would impart not just fighting techniques, but also the honor code, the strategies of warfare, and the duties of a vassal. A young page might listen to the elder knight recount tales of past battles or heroic deeds, internalizing the ideals of their class. Noble girls would remain in their mothers' or other noble women's households, where they learned the sophisticated skills of managing a large estate, overseeing servants, entertaining guests, and understanding the complex web of family alliances. An elder noblewoman would teach her daughter how to manage finances, how to supervise a household staff, how to read and write, if they were among the educated elite, and how to conduct themselves with grace and authority. They would learn about herbal remedies for common ailments within the household, and the art of embroidery or tapestry weaving, which could be both a skill and a means of contributing to the household's wealth or prestige. This education was aimed at preparing them to be effective mistresses of their own future households and capable partners in political and social life. Religious instruction was also a key part of household lore. Elders, especially parents, would teach children basic prayers, Bible stories, and the tenets of their faith. They would explain the importance of attending church, observing feast days and fasts, and living a moral life according to Christian doctrine. This instruction often occurred during evening prayers or during family meals, creating a continuous reinforcement of religious values from a young age. The elders' personal piety and adherence to religious practices served as a direct example for the younger generation. The transmission of faith was not just intellectual. It was deeply emotional and behavioral, shaping the child's worldview from their earliest memories. Crafts, even outside the formal guild system, were often passed down within families. A potter's son might learn the craft from his father, a weaver's daughter from her mother. These family trades often had specific techniques or recipes that were considered valuable family secrets, ensuring continuity and expertise. The elder parent would guide the younger family member through every step of the process, from preparing raw materials to finishing the final product. This direct intergenerational transfer of highly specialized skills was a common way for specialized knowledge to persist and develop across generations, contributing to the economic stability of the family unit. The transmission of family history and lineage was also a vital part of household lore, especially for noble and landholding families. Elders would recount the stories of their ancestors, the achievements of their family, and the history of their land or titles. This created a strong sense of identity and continuity, reminding younger generations of their heritage, their responsibilities, and their place within the social hierarchy. These stories were often repeated at family gatherings, solidifying the collective memory of the clan. This oral history, combined with any written genealogies or charters, reinforced the family's standing and claims within their community. The elder was the living embodiment of the family's past. Even within humble peasant families, specific local knowledge about the best foraging spots, the safest routes to market, the nuances of local dialects, or the unwritten rules of community interaction was transmitted from elder to younger. This was informal, continuous learning, absorbed through observation and participation in daily life. The elder's wisdom was invaluable for navigating the complex social and physical landscape of the medieval world, from understanding local customs to knowing which river crossing was safest. After heavy rains, the household was a micro-society, and the elders were the primary teachers for navigating its challenges and opportunities. Number 6. The Scholastic Revolution of the Universities. From the late 11th century onwards, a new type of knowledge transfer began to rise in Europe: the university. These were not monastic schools or guild workshops, but entirely new institutions, gathering scholars and students from across the continent. Here, elders, the masters and professors, stood at the pinnacle of intellectual life, passing on advanced knowledge in a way that was both ancient and revolutionary. The university was a marketplace of ideas where knowledge was debated, dissected, and disseminated, often in massive, unheated halls. The primary method of knowledge transfer in universities was the lecture known as lectio. An elder master, usually a doctor of theology, law, or medicine, would read aloud from an authoritative text, such as a work by Aristotle, a legal code, or a medical treatise by Galen. Students, typically young men who had already mastered Latin and basic logic, would sit on straw on the floor, listening intently, often making their own notes on wax tablets or precious parchment. The master's role was not just to read. It was to expound upon the text. He would clarify difficult passages, explain complex arguments, and offer different interpretations. This was a direct one-way transmission, but it demanded intense concentration and active listening from the students. The elder's authority stemmed from his deep knowledge of these foundational texts and his ability to interpret them. After the lectio, the more dynamic method of knowledge transfer came through the disputatio, or disputation. This was a formal debate, a central pillar of scholastic learning. The elder master would propose a question, often a complex theological or philosophical problem, like, does God exist? Or, can a good man steal to save his family? Students would then argue for opposing sides, presenting their arguments and citing authorities. The elder master would preside, guiding the discussion, correcting logical fallacies, and ensuring that arguments were grounded in accepted wisdom. This was not about finding a single right answer as much as it was about training students in rigorous logical thinking, critical analysis, and persuasive argumentation. The elder's role was to model intellectual rigor and to refine the student's ability to reason. He would demonstrate how to dismantle an argument, how to find weaknesses in an opponent's logic, and how to construct a robust defense for one's own position. This was a crucial skill for future lawyers, theologians, and administrators. Specific fields of study had their own elder masters. In law, students learned from masters who had spent decades studying Roman law, like Justinian's Corpus Juris Civilis, and canon law, the law of the church. The elder law professor would guide students through the complex labyrinth of legal precedents, principles, and procedures. They would analyze hypothetical cases, discuss the application of legal rules to real-world situations, and debate the moral implications of different legal outcomes. This was essential for training future judges, lawyers, and administrators for both secular and ecclesiastical courts. The elder's experience with actual legal practice, or his deep knowledge of countless historical cases, enriched the theoretical instruction. In medicine, elder masters would teach students about anatomy, often through studying texts rather than dissection, which was rare, pharmacology, and the theories of humors. While practical experience was limited in formal university settings, the theoretical framework was meticulously taught. An elder medical master might discuss the properties of various herbs, the diagnosis of common diseases based on symptoms, and the principles of ancient medical texts from Hippocrates and Galen. They would also teach the art of prognosis, predicting the course of an illness. This knowledge, though often limited by the scientific understanding of the era, was the most advanced medical thought available, and it was passed down through careful study and debate of authoritative texts. Students learned the foundational theories from these elders before they might pursue practical training elsewhere. Theology was the queen of the sciences in medieval universities, and elder masters in this field were among the most respected intellectuals of their time. They would guide students through the intricacies of Christian doctrine, the writings of church fathers like Augustine, and the works of contemporary theologians like Thomas Aquinas. The goal was to reconcile faith with reason, to systematically understand the nature of God, humanity, and salvation. This involved deep philosophical discussions, careful textual analysis, and often fierce debates over subtle theological points. The elder theologian's role was to transmit not just information, but a method of inquiry, a way of thinking about the most profound questions of existence within the framework of Christian belief. They taught students how to construct systematic theological arguments and how to defend their faith against intellectual challenges. Beyond the formal lectures and disputations, and informal mentorship often occurred. Students would seek out particular elder masters whose intellect or teaching style they admired. These informal interactions might involve more personal discussions, guidance on research, or advice on a student's future career. The elder master's personal library, often extensive and rare, might also be a source of knowledge for a select few students. The master's own research and writing would also serve as a model for the students, showing them how new knowledge was created and integrated into the existing intellectual framework. These informal interactions were often where a student's true passion for a subject was ignited and where they learned the unspoken rules of academic life. The physical environment of the university itself, with its specialized faculties, its libraries, and its traditions, reinforced the process of knowledge transfer. Students were immersed in an environment dedicated to learning, surrounded by scholars and texts. The very structure of the university, with its progression from bachelor's to master's to doctoral degrees, represented a ladder of knowledge, each rung supervised by elder scholars who had already ascended. The formal rituals of academic life, from gown and cap to ceremonial debates, emphasized the gravity and importance of the knowledge being transmitted. The university, guided by its elder masters, became a powerful engine for the preservation, interpretation, and slow advancement of knowledge in the medieval world. Number 5. The earthy wisdom of agriculture and folklore. For the vast majority of medieval people from the 5th to the 15th century, life was tethered to the land. The cycles of nature dictated survival, and the profound knowledge required to coax sustenance from the earth was passed down primarily by the elders, the experienced farmers, the village grandmothers, the weather-wise old men. This was a deep, empirical wisdom. honed over countless generations and often intertwined with folk beliefs and practical observation. It was knowledge acquired through living, watching, and doing. Elder farmers taught their younger counterparts the precise rhythms of the agricultural year. This wasn't theoretical knowledge. It was about knowing when to plant specific crops based on subtle environmental cues. They would observe the budding of certain trees, the migration patterns of birds, the length of daylight, and the characteristics of the moon. A seasoned farmer might advise a young man, plant your peas when the elm leaves are the size of a squirrel's ear, or sow your oats when the cuckoo calls. These were not just quaint sayings. They were highly accurate observations, refined over centuries. The elder would demonstrate the correct way to broadcast seeds to plow a furrow that conserved moisture, or to scythe hay efficiently. This was often done side by side with the younger person mimicking the elder's actions, learning the precise movements and the feel of the tools in their hands. Knowledge of soil management was crucial. Elders understood, through observation and trial and error, which fields needed to lie fallow to regain fertility, and which crops could be rotated to replenish nutrients. They would explain how to identify good soil, how to apply manure from livestock to enrich it, and how to manage drainage to prevent waterlogging. They might teach about the importance of specific types of weeds as indicators of soil health or deficiency. This was a deep, intuitive understanding of ecology, passed down through spoken advice and shared experience in the fields. The younger generation learned to respect the land and to work with its natural processes rather than against them. Livestock management was another immense body of knowledge. Elders taught how to breed animals, how to recognize signs of illness, and how to treat common ailments using herbal remedies or simple surgical procedures. They would demonstrate how to milk cows, shear sheep, and care for newborn animals. They taught about the best pastures for grazing, the ideal fodder for winter, and how to protect flocks from predators. A shepherd elder, for instance, would teach a young apprentice how to interpret the behavior of sheep, how to use a sheepdog, and how to navigate the landscape in all weather conditions to find lost animals. This involved acute observation and a deep understanding of animal behavior, all learned through years of living closely with the animals. Weather forecasting, critical for farming, was largely the domain of elders. They had spent decades observing the sky, the wind, the clouds, and the behavior of animals. They could often predict coming rain, frost, or storms by reading these subtle signs. Red sky at night, shepherd's delight. Red sky in morning, shepherd's warning, was one such oral tradition, embodying centuries of weather observation. They would pass on this knowledge through proverbs, anecdotes, and direct instruction, teaching younger individuals to look for specific atmospheric conditions or animal behaviors that signaled changes in the weather. Their accumulated wisdom was often the only form of weather prediction available. Folk medicine was a vibrant and often effective body of knowledge primarily passed down by elder women, midwives, herbalists, and village-wise women. They knew the medicinal properties of hundreds of plants growing in the local environment. They would teach younger apprentices how to identify these plants, when and how to harvest them, and how to prepare them into poultices, tinctures, teas, or salves. An elder herbalist might demonstrate how to make a decoction for a fever from willow bark, or a salve for wounds from plantain leaves. They would explain the symptoms of common illnesses and recommend specific remedies. This knowledge was often highly localized, specific to the flora of a particular region, and it was deeply experiential. It was also intertwined with beliefs about magic and superstition. But at its core were practical, empirically tested remedies. Hunting, fishing, and foraging skills were also transmitted by elders. A seasoned hunter would teach a young man how to track animals by recognizing footprints and droppings, how to set snares, how to use a bow or sling effectively, and how to butcher game. He would impart knowledge about the habits of local wildlife, the best times and places to hunt, and the unwritten rules of the hunt. Foraging involved knowing which wild plants, berries, mushrooms, and nuts were edible, and which were poisonous, how to find them, and when they were in season. An elder woman might take children into the woods, pointing out specific plants and explaining their uses. This was vital survival knowledge, ensuring that communities could supplement their agricultural produce with wild resources. The cultural memory of a community, its history, its myths, and its values was also held by the elders. They would recount stories of local heroes, tragic events, and the origins of particular traditions. These stories often contained moral lessons, warnings, or explanations for social customs. They were told around the fire during feasts or while working in the fields, weaving the community's past into the fabric of daily life. The elder, often the most respected member of the community, was the living embodiment of its collective memory and identity. Through these stories, children learned about their heritage, their place in the community, and the expectations placed upon them. The knowledge passed on by elders in agriculture and folklore was rarely written down. It was embodied in their practices, their memory, and their narratives. It was continuous learning, reinforced by daily observation, and the constant need for survival. This deep, practical wisdom was the bedrock of medieval society, ensuring that communities could feed themselves, heal themselves, and maintain their social and cultural continuity in a world where formal education was a rarity. Number 4. The Path of the Knight. Chivalric training and courtly education. For the sons and sometimes daughters of the nobility in the medieval period, from the 11th to the 15th century, knowledge was transmitted through a rigorous, multi-stage process centered around martial prowess, courtly conduct, and administrative skills. This was the world of chivalric training, where elders, experienced knights, noble lords and ladies, and courtly tutors shaped the next generation of aristocratic leaders. It was an education designed to prepare them for both war and peace, power and responsibility. The journey began early, typically around the age of 7, when a noble boy would be sent away from his own family to live in the household of another, often more powerful lord or knight. Here he would serve as a page. His initial training involved observation and basic service. Elder squires and knights would teach him about weaponry by allowing him to clean armor and care for horses. He would learn the fundamentals of horsemanship, starting with simple riding lessons and gradually moving to more complex maneuvers. He would absorb courtly etiquette by watching the lord and lady, learning how to address superiors, how to serve at table, and how to conduct himself with deference and respect. The elder lord's household was a school of manners, and the page was immersed in its daily lessons. Around the age of 14, a page would typically advance to become a squire. This was where the serious training began. The elder knight, his master, would take the squire under his direct tutelage. The squire would accompany his knight to tournaments, on hunts, and, crucially, into battle. This was learning by doing in the most immediate and dangerous sense. The elder knight would teach the squire how to wield a sword, a lance, and a shield effectively. He would demonstrate combat techniques, discuss battlefield strategy, and explain the importance of formations and discipline. The squire would practice relentlessly, often against other squires or even against his master in mock combat. The elder knight's scarred body and seasoned advice were the ultimate textbook. He would teach about the nuances of plate armor, how to repair it, and how to maintain weapons. This was practical life or death knowledge. Beyond combat, the elder knight also taught the squire about the codes of chivalry. This was the moral framework for a knight's life: courage, honor, loyalty to one's lord, protection of the weak, and adherence to Christian virtues. These values were not just preached, they were demonstrated through the elder knight's own conduct and through stories of legendary knights and heroic deeds. The squire learned about the importance of keeping one's word, showing mercy to defeated foes, and upholding justice. This ethical dimension was critical for shaping a true knight, not just a brute fighter. The elder's reputation and actions served as a living example. For young noblewomen, their education primarily conducted within the household of an elder noblewoman, often their mother or a powerful female relative, focused on the intricate skills of managing a large estate and navigating courtly society. An elder lady would teach her daughter how to oversee the household staff, manage finances, entertain important guests, and organize events. She would learn about herbal remedies for the care of the family and servants, and sometimes basic medical knowledge for childbirth. She might also learn to read and write, if literacy was valued in her family, and perhaps even some Latin or French depending on the region and status. The elder noblewoman would teach about the complex web of family alliances, the importance of advantageous marriages, and the subtle art of political influence within the court. This was an education in power, diplomacy, and resource management, vital for running a powerful noble house. Hunting was a crucial skill for both noblemen and noblewomen, serving as military training, food provision, and a social pastime. Elders, often experienced huntsmen or older family members, would teach about tracking game, horsemanship in rough terrain, the use of hunting dogs, and the proper etiquette of the hunt. They would explain about different types of quarry, the seasons for hunting, and the methods for dispatching and butchering animals. The elders' knowledge of the local landscape and the habits of its wildlife was invaluable. This was not just about sport. It was about demonstrating prowess, leadership, and the ability to provide for one's household. Music, poetry, and games were also part of courtly education passed on by elder tutors, or by observing the refined entertainments of the court. A young noble might learn to play a musical instrument, to compose verses, or to play chess. These skills were important for social cohesion, for demonstrating refinement, and for attracting patrons or spouses. The elder troubadour or court musician would teach the nuances of lyrical poetry, or the complexities of a musical composition, often incorporating stories or historical events into the art. These cultural skills were just as important as martial ones for securing one's place in high society. Beyond the formal stages, personal mentorship from an elder was key. An elder knight might take a particular interest in a promising squire, offering additional guidance, sharing personal anecdotes from campaigns, and providing opportunities for advancement. This informal transmission of wisdom, often during long journeys or quiet moments, could be profoundly influential. The elders' lived experience, their successes and failures became lessons for the younger generation, guiding them through the moral and practical dilemmas they would face as leaders. This personal bond often extended beyond the formal training period, creating lasting alliances and networks. The process of chivalric training was a holistic immersion into the aristocratic way of life, guided by elders at every turn. It was about shaping not just skilled warriors, but cultured leaders, capable administrators and responsible stewards of their families and lands. The knowledge passed on encompassed martial arts, ethics, governance, social graces, and practical skills, all designed to perpetuate the power and influence of the medieval nobility. The elder in this context was the living embodiment of aristocratic ideals, carefully molding the next generation in their own image. Number 3. The healing touch. Medical apprenticeship and folk medicine. In the medieval world between the 5th and 15th centuries, formal medical institutions were scarce and often inaccessible. The vast majority of healing knowledge was passed down through direct apprenticeship, often within families, or through the practice of folk healers and midwives. Elders in these roles were the custodians of practical, often empirically derived medical wisdom, transmitted through hands-on training and oral tradition. Their knowledge was a blend of ancient remedies, local botanical wisdom, and observation, honed over a lifetime. A young person interested in healing, often a girl, in the case of midwifery, or a boy for barber surgeons or apothecaries, would begin as an apprentice to an elder practitioner. This was an intensive, immersed educationer. For a village herbalist, the elder would take the apprentice into the fields and forests, teaching them to identify medicinal plants. They would learn which parts of the plant to use, roots, leaves, flowers, or bark, and the correct time of year to harvest them for maximum potency. The elder would demonstrate how to prepare these herbs, how to dry them, how to grind them into powders, how to make infusions, teas, decoctions, boiled extracts. They would explain the specific ailments each herb was believed to treat, from fevers and coughs to wounds and digestive issues. This was knowledge built on generations of observation and experimentation, often passed from parent to child or elder to chosen successor for midwives. The training was even more intimate. A young woman would assist an elder midwife during countless births. She would learn about the stages of labor, how to manage complications, and how to care for both mother and newborn. The elder midwife would demonstrate techniques for positioning, the mother for aiding delivery, and for handling emergencies like hemorrhage or breech births. She would teach about common postpartum issues and remedies for both mother and baby. This was intensely practical knowledge, often involving physical touch and an intuitive understanding of the birthing process. The elder's calm demeanor, experience, and ability to make quick decisions under pressure were as much a part of the lesson as any specific technique. They also passed on a vast body of lore related to pregnancy, childbirth, and infant care, often including traditional chants, prayers, or rituals believed to ensure a safe delivery. Barber surgeons who performed minor surgical procedures, bleeding, and tooth extractions also trained through apprenticeship. An elder barber surgeon would teach his apprentice how to use and sharpen various instruments, razors, lancets, and forceps. They would demonstrate how to set simple fractures, how to stitch wounds, how to perform bloodletting, a common medieval medical practice, and how to extract teeth. The apprentice would observe countless procedures, then assist and eventually perform them under the elder's close supervision. This was often a messy and painful business, and the elder taught about hygiene, albeit primitive by modern standards, pain management, often just speed, and patient care. The elder's calm hand and practiced movements were essential lessons for the apprentice. Apothecaries who prepared and sold medicines learned from elder apothecaries. This apprenticeship involved learning about various ingredients, both herbal and mineral, how to mix them in precise quantities, and how to create various preparations like pills, syrups, and ointments. The elder would teach about weights and measures, the properties of different substances, and how to identify counterfeit or low-quality ingredients. They also learned about the business of the apothecary, how to source ingredients, how to manage stock, and how to serve customers. This was a blend of practical chemistry, botany, and commerce, all passed down through direct instruction and hands-on practice. Diagnosis was a significant skill taught by elders. While lacking modern diagnostic tools, medieval healers relied on keen observation of symptoms, changes in skin color, pulse, temperature, and the appearance of urine or feces. An elder healer would teach an apprentice how to interpret these signs, how to ask questions to elicit a patient's full symptoms, and how to connect them to known ailments. This involved a deep understanding of the human body as they understood it, often based on humoral theory and the patterns of disease. The elders' experience with countless patients gave them a unique ability to recognize subtle variations and make educated guesses about the nature of an illness. The ethical dimensions of healing were also passed on. Elders would teach about compassion for the sick, the importance of confidentiality, and the responsibility to do no harm. While not formalized like the Hippocratic Oath, for most practitioners these principles were often conveyed through the elder's own conduct and through stories of successful or failed treatments. The reputation of a healer was built on trust, skill, and perceived integrity, all cultivated through the example of the elder. The knowledge transmitted also included the cultural and spiritual aspects of healing. Many medieval people believed illness could be caused by spiritual factors, witchcraft, or divine punishment. Elders often incorporated prayers, charms, and rituals into their healing practices. They would teach the appropriate prayers to say over a sick person, the use of holy water, or relics, or the performance of specific rites believed to ward off evil. This blending of practical remedies with spiritual beliefs was common, and the elder was the authority on both aspects, understanding the holistic needs of the patient in their cultural context. For the rare university-trained physicians, knowledge transmission was more theoretical through lectures on ancient texts. However, even these highly educated individuals often started with or later sought practical knowledge from elder practitioners in a clinical setting. While formal dissections were rare, some knowledge of anatomy and physiology was transmitted through detailed textual descriptions and diagrams, often from Arabic scholars. The elder physician would explain the theories of the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile, and how imbalances were believed to cause illness. He would teach about diet, exercise, and environmental factors believed to influence health. However, the most direct hands-on medical knowledge for the general population came from the unwritten traditions of the elder village healers, midwives, and barber surgeons whose wisdom was forged in the crucible of daily practice and necessity. Number 2. The foundations of justice. Legal apprenticeship and customary law. In the medieval legal landscape, from the 5th to the 15th century, knowledge of law was a complex mosaic of Roman law, canon law, and perhaps most pervasive, customary law. For those who would eventually administer justice, advise, lords, or even serve as legal practitioners, the transmission of this knowledge was often through direct apprenticeship and a deep immersion in established practices rather than just codified text. Elders experienced judges, clerks, legal scholars, and even local community leaders were the living repositories of legal precedent and tradition. For those training in the nascent legal professions, such as those who would become clerks in royal courts or legal advisors to nobles, apprenticeship was paramount. A young, aspiring legal mind would attach himself to an elder clerk or a master of writs. He would begin by observing the daily workings of the court, learning the routines, the protocols, and the language of legal discourse. He would copy documents, learn to engross charters, and organize records. The elder clerk would teach him the precise format for legal documents, the correct terminology, and the intricate procedures for bringing cases, issuing summonses, and recording judgments. This was a highly practical education, requiring meticulous attention to detail and a strong grasp of formal language. The elders' expertise lay in their intimate familiarity with endless scrolls of precedent and countless hours spent in the courtroom. In places like England, where common law developed, legal knowledge was largely unwritten based on judicial precedents and established customs. Young students would join inns of court like Lincoln's Inn or Gray's Inn, where elder barristers and judges would pass on their knowledge. This involved listening to actual court proceedings, observing the arguments presented, and noting the judgments made. The elders would then hold moot courts or readings, where they would discuss hypothetical cases, analyze recent judgments, and debate points of law with their students. This was a form of interactive learning where students learn by doing and by critically engaging with the elders' experienced interpretations of the law. They learned to think like lawyers, to identify legal issues, and to construct persuasive arguments based on past decisions. The very body of common law grew and was transmitted through this iterative process, with each generation of elders adding their interpretations to the collective wisdom. Customary law, prevalent in much of Europe, was even more reliant on the wisdom of elders within local communities. Before widespread royal decrees or formal legal codes, many disputes were settled based on long-standing traditions and precedents. When a land dispute arose or an accusation of theft was made, the elders of the village or town, often the most respected and long-lived individuals, would be consulted. They would recall how similar cases had been settled in the past, recite the community's unwritten rules, and help mediate a resolution. Their authority came from their memory, their reputation for fairness, and their deep understanding of the local community's history and values. A younger villager, aspiring to a role in community governance, would sit and listen to these elders, absorbing their narratives of past disputes and their interpretations of justice. The elder was the living law book, For those studying canon law, the law of the church, which was crucial for ecclesiastical courts, and for the administration of the vast church hierarchy, university masters were key. Elder professors of canon law would lecture on papal decrees, church councils, and theological principles that underpinned church law. They would conduct disputations where students debated complex legal and moral dilemmas, such as issues of marriage, inheritance, or heresy. This was a highly textual form of knowledge transfer, but the elder's role was to provide authoritative interpretation and to guide students through the complex system of church jurisdiction. Many future bishops, abbots, and administrators would be trained in these settings, learning how to govern and to apply justice within the church's extensive legal framework. The knowledge transmitted also included the art of rhetoric and persuasion. For lawyers, judges, and administrators, the ability to articulate arguments clearly, to present evidence effectively, and to persuade others was paramount. Elder legal practitioners would demonstrate these skills in court and then discuss with their apprentices the techniques of effective speech, logical construction, and the psychology of influencing others. This was not just about knowing the law, but about knowing how to use the law effectively. The elder's mastery of language and debate was a powerful lesson. Beyond the formal legal roles, lords and nobles also needed a strong understanding of law to govern their lands and dispense justice in their own courts. Elder noblemen would instruct their heirs on the rights and responsibilities associated with their feudal holdings, the customs of their tenants, and the penalties for various infractions. They would teach about the importance of maintaining order, collecting dues, and arbitrating disputes among their vassals. This was a form of administrative legal knowledge, vital for effective governance and the maintenance of their power. This instruction often occurred through direct supervision, observation, and participation in the Lord's court, where the young heir would sit alongside his elder father, observing how justice was meted out. The ethical dimension of justice was also a crucial part of the transmission. Elders, whether judges, clerks, or community leaders, would impress upon their students the importance of impartiality, fairness, and the pursuit of truth. They would share stories of corrupt officials or unjust rulings as cautionary tales, emphasizing the moral responsibility that came with wielding legal authority. The concept of right and wrong was deeply embedded in medieval legal thought, often intertwined with religious doctrine, and the elders were the moral compass for those learning to administer justice. The process of learning law in the medieval period was thus deeply immersive, practical, and often oral. It relied heavily on the accumulated wisdom and lived experience of elders who served as teachers, mentored, and living embodiments of legal tradition. Whether in the bustling courtrooms, the quiet chambers of scribes, or the informal gatherings of village elders, the foundations of justice were laid through direct transmission from the old to the young, preserving and evolving the legal systems that shaped medieval society. Number 1. The soul's journey. Religious instruction and liturgical practices throughout the entire medieval period, from the 5th to the 15th century, the Church was the central institution, shaping daily life and understanding the world. Religious instruction was not just a subject. It was a pervasive way of life, and elders, priests, monks, nuns, and devout family members were the primary conduits for this spiritual and moral knowledge. This was a constant reinforcing process, guiding individuals from infancy through old age in their relationship with God, their community, and the afterlife. At the most basic level within families, elders taught children the core tenets of Christianity. Parents and grandparents would teach simple prayers like the Lord's Prayer and the Hail Mary, often in Latin, initially, and then explaining their meaning in the vernacular. They would recount biblical stories like the creation, the life of Jesus, and tales of saints, often using visual aids like stained glass windows or carvings in churches. This was done through storytelling, repetition, and daily example. The elder would explain the importance of attending Mass, confessing sins, and receiving communion, They would teach about the 7 deadly sins and the virtues, impressing upon children the moral framework for a Christian life. The home was the first catechism class, with the elder as the initial spiritual guide. In local parishes, the elder priest was the most significant figure for religious instruction. For a largely illiterate populace, the sermon was the main way they received theological knowledge. The priest would preach from the pulpit, explaining scripture, expounding on Christian doctrine, and delivering moral lessons. He would use vivid imagery, relatable parables, and dramatic rhetoric to ensure his message resonated with the congregation. He would teach about the meaning of the sacraments: baptism, confirmation, communion, penance, anointing of the sick, holy orders and matrimony, and their significance for salvation. He would explain the liturgical calendar, the importance of feast days and fasts, and the meaning of religious rituals. The elder priest's voice was the authoritative voice of God in the church and the community, and his sermons were the primary source of religious knowledge for most people. For those who entered monastic life, religious instruction became incredibly deep and formalized, as mentioned earlier. Elder monks and nuns, particularly abbots, abbesses, and spiritual directors, guided younger members through intensive theological study, spiritual discipline, and the practice of lectio divina. They would teach about the writings of church fathers, the lives of saints, and the nuances of monastic rules, like the rule of Saint Benedict. The elders' own spiritual journey and wisdom became a model for the younger generation, guiding them in contemplation, prayer, and the pursuit of holiness. This was often a one-on-one mentorship, where the elder would listen to the spiritual struggles of the younger member and offer guidance, correction, and encouragement. The elder's depth of spiritual experience was highly valued. Liturgical practices were a profound form of knowledge transmission, and elders were crucial in maintaining their integrity and meaning. The elder choirmaster in a monastery or cathedral would teach younger choristers the complex chants and polyphony of medieval sacred music. This was not just about memorizing notes. It was about understanding the emotional and spiritual power of the music and its role in conveying theological truth. The elder master of ceremonies would teach priests and deacons the precise rituals for celebrating Mass, administering sacraments, and conducting other liturgical services. Every gesture, every vestment, every word in the liturgy carried centuries of accumulated meaning, and the elders ensured that these traditions were faithfully passed down. The very performance of the liturgy was a living lesson in faith and reverence. The lives of saints were another significant source of religious knowledge, passed on through oral accounts, sermons, and the veneration of relics. Elders would recount stories of the martyrs, confessors, and virgins, highlighting their virtues, their sacrifices, and their miraculous deeds. These narratives served as moral exemplars, showing ordinary people how to live a life pleasing to God and how to face trials with faith. The elders' devotion to a particular saint often encouraged similar devotion in the younger generation, leading to pilgrimages or acts of charity inspired by the saint's example. These stories were often highly emotional and visually rich, making them memorable and able. Pilgrimage itself was a form of religious education, often guided by elders. An elder, perhaps a seasoned pilgrim, would guide younger individuals on journeys to holy sites, explaining the significance of each shrine, recounting tales of miracles associated with the place, and teaching the appropriate prayers or rituals to perform there. The physical act of pilgrimage, the hardships endured, and the shared spiritual experience reinforced the lessons, making the abstract concepts of faith tangible. The elders' experience made the journey not just a physical one, but a spiritual one, guiding the younger pilgrims' understanding of the divine. Confession was a direct personal form of knowledge transmission. An elder priest acting as a confessor would listen to the sins of an individual, offer penance, and provide spiritual advice. This was an opportunity for the elder to guide the penitent in moral living, to explain theological concepts related to sin and forgiveness, and to offer comfort and direction. The confessional booth was a private classroom where the elder imparted highly personalized religious guidance. Finally, the visual culture of the church, the frescoes, statues, altarpieces, and stained glass windows served as a powerful tool for religious instruction, especially for the illiterate. Elders would interpret these images for the younger generation, explaining the biblical scenes, the lives of saints depicted, and the theological symbolism embedded in the art. The elder was the interpreter of the visual Bible, transforming static images into living narratives that conveyed Christian doctrine and morality. This ubiquitous religious instruction, woven into every aspect of medieval life and constantly reinforced by elders, ensured that faith was not just an intellectual belief, but a lived experience shaping the thoughts, actions,